The NBA trade deadline is about a week away, and a lot of us in Bulls Nation are wondering what the Chicago Bulls will do, if anything. So, in today's episode, we got to ask the question: will the Chicago Bulls make the same trade deadline mistakes as years past? And then, with a couple of games coming ahead of the trade deadline, will that determine how the Chicago Bulls will move ahead of the NBA trade deadline? Y'all know we're going to talk about it, break it all down, but you got to hear the music first.
Cognac, gang.
Shy Boys Podcast with the Cognac Boys. I'm Cognac Boy Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's daily episode. So if you're tuned in, ready to talk Bulls basketball, make sure you go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The Chicago Bulls, they have a game later today versus the Indiana Pacers, and I'm excited because I get to watch it from the comfort of my home because it is cold and a mug outside. And there is, where I live, 10 inches of snow on the ground. So I'm not really that happy and in the mood for going outside today. I just keep it real. But I'm hoping you all are staying safe and stay as warm as possible. But hey, let's get into the content, man. Will the Chicago Bulls make the same trade deadline mistakes of years past? That's a tall question for me. I can immediately jump on the negative side. I can immediately jump on the positive side. But I'm going to try to provide some objectivity into the entire question. But if we're going off things that have transpired in years past, yes, last year we witnessed Zach LaVine be traded in January for guys like Zach Collins, Kevin Huerter, Trey Jones, and as it currently saying appears, that was a good move to make on behalf of the Chicago Bulls. But years prior to that, one could argue that Zach LaVine's value was seen as being way more higher at that particular moment. But hey, the Chicago Bulls did ultimately move Zach LaVine. They ultimately did win the trade, in my personal opinion. But what we always could go back and say hindsight is 2020, and what if they would have traded him for that package that was potentially coming across the desk from the New York Knicks? But hey, we chalk it up to the game. We leave it there where it is. Then we remember a few years ago we heard that Andre Drummond was a guy on the radar of the 76ers and was offering the Chicago Bulls 2 second-round picks. The Chicago Bulls felt like that wasn't quite enough, and they ultimately retained Andre Drummond, and they ultimately lost him for nothing. And then we look at examples to where we had Lonzo Ball go down with the injury after being number one in the Eastern Conference, and then no moves to go out there and improve the basketball team. It seems like the front office is one front office that likes to, number one, sit on their hands just to see what happens throughout an entire season. And then number two, be reluctant or overvalue the players that they have on their team to think that they're going to run off in a heist versus said teams around the NBA. I don't necessarily know if the negotiation tactics of the front office is one that I will consider strong. I will say that it appears that they are learning from their past mistakes. They gave that contract out to Patrick Williams, and then in return, they did business the right way with Josh Giddey, with not necessarily folding to the demand of $30 million. Then when you look at the Isaac Okoro trade, where there was many people that felt like, hey, you could have moved off Lonzo Ball a lot faster and potentially got that first-round pick from the Memphis Grizzlies, but ultimately they waited, which was not the best decision in my evaluation. But they did wait and did go out there and get Isaac Okoro, who this season has been much better than Lonzo Ball. So it's a number of things to go out there and we can point to and look at the history of our front office to be like, man, I don't know what these guys are going to do. And that's why I stand today. I don't necessarily know what the Chicago Bulls will do. Will they learn from their mistakes, like a couple examples that we just mapped out, or will these guys continue just to remain the same people that they are? Now, I'm looking at the Chicago Bulls, and the reason I come to you all and just say, I don't know what they're going to do is because of All the things that transpired that we just previously talked about, but there are also certain reports that have came out and said that the Chicago Bulls may be interested in retaining Nikola Vucevic beyond this season. That is absurd to me. That does not make sense to me. I don't really like that. That I don't. That's not, again. That is not to crap on Nikola Vucevic. That is not to say that he's a bad basketball player, but that is to say it's time to move on and move into a different style of play when it comes to the guys that's in our front court. If you all remember, I came into the season and I pretty much said, hey, I'd rather go into the season with Zach Collins and Jalen Smith. Now, as it currently stands, we would have been down a big man. But hey, that was something that I was willing to do, and that was something I was willing to stand on. And we can go back and say that Nikola Vucevic wasn't supposed to be here beyond this to even start this season, but nonetheless, he's still here. So I think that ultimately we'll find out what the move is if there is a move coming. We're hearing a number of different rumors. The Chicago Bulls have major decisions that they have to make, and they have decisions that they have to make that can affect this basketball team. What do you do with Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu? What do you do with the expiring contracts that are on your books? What do you do when a deal comes across your desk that gives you players and draft assets? What will the Chicago Bulls do? Because you can't continue to run this cycle of, oh, we're falling in love and we are just 2 games away out of the 6th seed. So let's just go right there and stand pat and prepare for 2026 at the end of the season, which is a fine way to look at it when you talk about all that money that's going to be coming in. But how can you go out there and utilize some of these expiring contracts to, per se, get some players that you can continue to develop or look into, or add on to not allowing guys to just walk out of the franchise for anything? I think the Chicago Bulls have to come to the terms of saying, look, we like Kevin Huerter. He's on an expiring contract. What is the market saying about him? What is the market saying about Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu? But I will say I'm going to stand on business and say I believe Ayo Dosunmu should be a Chicago Bulls for the next few years. Kobe White, I still believe, is a really good player. But I think that this team needs to continue to mold into something that is much more better and competitive than what we have seen over the last few years. So that's a tough decision that the Chicago Bulls front office has to make, and that's why they are there, not me. I'm not in the building. I get to come out and make 2K trades. Hypothetically, I get to do that. These guys get paid to go out there and do an absolute job. So they have to go out there and do their job. And with the Chicago Bulls now 2 games out of the 6th seed, I am a bit weary on how the front office is evaluating this team. We've seen them have a hot start. We've seen them have a rough patch, and they turned it on as of late to where they are now, to where there are 2 games out of the 6th seed, which is crazy work considering how it was going downhill at one point. And these guys has continually to battle. They have continued to go out there and battle through injuries. They continue to go out there and win some games that most of us didn't think that they were going to be winning. So those are things that you should look into. But I said it once, I'm gonna say it again. I'm about to say it again. Do not fall in love with the honeymoon. Don't fall in love with the honeymoon, because what's next? To be in the same spot that we were in? I'm of the mindset that it's okay to take 2 steps back to move 3 steps forward. We've seen it with a number of teams around the league, especially these younger teams. We've seen that. Now with rumors and stuff coming out, hey, I ain't gonna lie. If Houston come calling, if you can get a piece from one, if you can get one of them wings over there, Tyree Eason, add on a little bit more. I don't know. That's just what I'm interested in. But ultimately, we'll see what they do. Hopefully, they don't make the same mistakes as they made in the past. And I think that they should show a little bit of aggression, especially with the latest report saying that these guys are interested in making moves and being buyers to go out there and make a push at the playoffs. We'll see what type of moves come with that. We've heard the Chicago Bulls be mentioned in talks with Zion Williamson and Eve Missy. We don't necessarily know where those talks are at today, But those are moves that you go out there and make and say, hey, Zion Williamson can absolutely make this team a lot better. And I agree. He can absolutely make this team a lot better if Billy Donovan decides that he wants to coach Montes Buzelis and all these other guys the correct way. So we'll see. Now, before we get up out of here, we got to talk about the Chicago Bulls and their next 5 games. The next 5 games start tonight. That is the Pacers 3 times in a row versus the Heat. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody start fighting. And then the Bucks before we reach the NBA trade deadline. So 5 games before the NBA trade deadline. Will that decide the direction of where the Chicago Bulls will go? I believe it will. If the Chicago Bulls, for the sake of discussion, go out there and beat the Pacers tonight, and let's just say out of the 3 games they play the Miami Heat, they win 2 of those, and then beat the Bucks, the Bulls can be in really, really good position in the Eastern Conference standings. Simply because if you go out there and you win these basketball games, you get 2 wins versus the lower seeds and the Pacers, who's the worst team in the Eastern Conference, and the Milwaukee Bucks, who's the 12th seed in the Eastern Conference. And then you go out there and you win more games out of the 3 games that you have versus the Miami Heat, who's the 7th seed, by the way. You put yourself in a position to where you can lean into making that playoff push. I think that's something that the Chicago Bulls are going to be looking at closely. I don't necessarily know how aggressive they will be. Me personally, I do not see a fire sale coming, but I do see the Chicago Bulls potentially going out there and being buyers. A bit contradictory when it comes to if they're going to make the same mistakes of years past, but I think there's a reality that could be that I think there's a conversation that could become a reality if we see the Chicago Bulls win most of these games ahead of the trade deadline, and the Chicago Bulls potentially pull off a move to go and get big man help or try to find another wing. I think that's a real possibility, but we'll see what happens with it, man. I think that they got to get to work. The guys going to go out there, and we know the Bulls are going to battle, but our front office need to battle too, man. The front office need to put us in a position to where we can feel a lot more comfortable about the direction of the team. I think some of us feel okay about it, but there are some of us that are pessimistic, and rightfully so, because right now, y'all heard me, and I said it plenty of times. Only untouchables is 3 players. But I will understand if some of those players are moved depending on who's the player that's coming on over. So those are decisions that the Chicago Bulls will have to make. Y'all know we're going to be right here covering it, and we definitely going to be in a live call later today. So make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know your thoughts and everything down below, because that is it for me today. I appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all always see red. Y'all already know. I'm going to catch y'all on the next one for sure. Peace.
Cognac. Gang.